It's up. Good. So I'm Ruben Nijveld. I work at Tweede Golf, like Alex just told. So I want to talk to you about Sudo, and well, to talk about something we should know what it is. So I think probably everyone knows what Sudo is, but in case you don't, say for example I have this file here, hello.txt, and it is only owned by root, and no one but root can access this file. Well, if I do this as another user, for example, I do cat of that file, so I want to see what the contents of that file are, I get an error saying, okay, you can't do that. And then I put in front of that command, I put sudo, and then suddenly it asks for my password, and all of a sudden I can see the contents of the file. And for those of you that use Windows and stuff like that, maybe look at this comic. And if you haven't seen this comic before, then you're one of today's lucky 10,000. And if you don't know that reference, you should look that one up. After my talk, of course. So that sandwich thing, funnily enough, the original Sudo implementation actually uses the sandwich as a logo since that comic got so big. So this is now the official Sudo logo, which is amazing, I think. So we are rewriting Sudo in Rust, and with we, I mean Tweede Golf, together with Ferrous Systems from Berlin. So we are not re-implementing the entirety of Sudo. We are building a drop-in replacement for just the common use case of Sudo. And as Alex said, we are being financed by ISRG, so the makers of Let's Encrypt. So yeah, why would we re-implement Sudo, of course, is then the question that's best to ask. And well, the original Sudo implementation is now over 40 years old. It was created at a time when BSD 4 point something, I think, was just around the corner, which is like somewhere in the early 1980s. Linux wasn't even a thought, so there couldn't possibly have been any forethought in how to support Linux because it didn't even exist. It's all legacy, built upon legacy, legacy defaults, legacy features, all kinds of stuff is in there. And of course, all this stuff is written in C with lots of strings all around, stringly typed interfaces, strings everywhere. And of course, we all know how beautiful C strings are. And the final thing to know here is that Sudo is a setuid program. And what that means is that Sudo doesn't run as the user you are executing the commands to. So you're saying as user X, okay, I want to run this, but instead it gets run as the owner of the file. So for Sudo, this is root. So even though I'm not root, I can run Sudo, and Sudo itself will run as root. So that means that this program, which is basically a privilege escalation bug all in itself just because it's setuid. And on top of that, there are lots of bugs in the Linux kernel where setuid programs can cause all kinds of weird behavior. So one of my colleagues, for example, just found out, I think 2 weeks ago, that there is a bug in the Linux kernel with Bluetooth handling. So yeah, lots of stuff that could go wrong here. Yeah, and the thing I want to say, all of this may sound really bad about Sudo, but the original maintainer, Todd Miller, is actually a really good guy, and he really tries to make this thing secure, but just the history is catching up, and this work has been going on for 40 years, so yeah, I don't want to play down on Sudo, I just want to try and get a better implementation using our modern tools. So of course, the thing that I should be talking about, because this is Rust after all, is yeah, Sudo has had its fair share of buffer overflows, and modern tools such as Rust, and of course helps make all that stuff a lot better. And yeah, surely the memory safety thing would be the key reason here to re-implement that. And for the ISRG, this is definitely the case. But as we are re-implementing it anyway, there's more stuff to Sudo. So there's actually quite a lot of stuff in Sudo that you might not expect. So did you know, for example, that user and group names are matched case insensitive by default, whereas the whole rest of your Linux or BSD system will do everything case sensitive. Kind of weird. Did you know that you can use globs and regedges in specifying which commands you can run? So, for example, here I have a file or a line in the sudo file that says that I can echo files from var log something. But actually, this is not doing what you think it's doing, because a glob in this way is actually allowing any number of arguments after this. So this means that I can just echo, say, for example, some file from var log, and then after that I echo etc shadow or something, and then this is all fine according to this syntax. So did you know that sudo can actually store all input and output that comes from a command that was run with sudo? And this all contains lots of scary features, such as using regexes to filter out passwords that were input through standard in. Lots of great stuff. Did you know that the sudo syntax actually has lots of syntax concerning host names? So every line in the sudo syntax can actually be filtered out based on the host name. So you can have one sudo file distributed across multiple hosts and then have different sets of rules for every different host. Interesting. Did you know that when you type an incorrect password, you can ask sudo to insult you? Great. So for example, this is one of those insults. My pet ferret can type better than you, and there are lots worse insults in there. And did you know that each and every one of these settings I can change on a per group, but also a per user, but also a per command basis? So each and every one of these settings and lots more settings can change based on anything at all. So I have this little gem. So say we have the user Ferrous in our system, and here I say, okay, if you're the user Ferrous but typed in this really weird way, then we should stop matching case insensitive, but instead match case sensitive. But then is now Ferrous allowed to run the command, or is it not allowed to run the command? Because if this matches, then it should no longer match, because then the case insensitive matching should no longer apply. So this is turning into a nice circle of thought where basically, yeah, we don't know the answer. So really, all I'm wanting to say is memory safety is just a start, and re-implementing sudo has lots of other advantages as well. Yeah, so the thing, of course, that I mentioned already, we can get rid of a lot of legacy stuff. There's a lot of stuff in sudo that you don't need in a modern system. So for example, PAM, the pluggable authentication modules, which is available in basically any Unix system these days, you can use that instead of having all these custom authentication methods in sudo. So you don't need anything else anymore. For example, NSS, the name services switch, I believe it's called, which is in libc, basically glibc and other libc variants have the same thing. So you can use this to get your user from another location than just the etc passwd file that is on your system. So for example, you could get your users from LDAP or stuff like that. So we don't need to build all this LDAP integration anymore, or at least we could, but yeah, not needed that much anymore. So yeah, we can get rid of a lot of old stuff that you don't need anymore. Yeah, we can leverage the Rust type system a lot. Of course, we can use enums and new types to prevent mistakes, whereas sudo uses all these strings or void pointers or stuff like that all over the place. We can use strong typing to get a lot better strictness about what we accept and what we don't accept. And we can also define new interfaces for modern systems. So sudo has a plugin architecture, but those plugins were defined in like the 1990s somewhere, and they don't make much sense these days anymore. So we can look back at the past 40 years and we can say, okay, given what happened the past 40 years, these are the logical boundaries to have for a modern sudo implementation. And we can also think about alternative configuration formats, because as I showed you on the last slide, there are some weird things about the sudoers configuration format. And yes, we have heard about doas. So doas is the OpenBSD alternative to sudo, and it has a different configuration syntax. And yeah, one of the things we might look at is actually also implementing that configuration syntax. But this is future work, of course. Yeah, so we could use your help, because right now we are still working on getting the basics working. We have a sudo that can run commands and that parses your sudoers file. But we love to know about any non-standard usage of sudo, because yeah, most people will probably ever only run into sudo when you need to do something as root, and just run it as root, I don't care. But there are lots of alternative ways you can use sudo, and we'd love to know if there is anyone that's using sudo in such a way. And similar to that, we'd also love to know about any non-standard sudoers files. So we've all seen the sudoers files in distributions such as Debian or Fedora, but we'd like to know about sudoers files that aren't those standard sudoers files as well. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for listening, and if there are any questions.
Oh, that's great. There's a question right there. There you go.
Nope.
Try again. Just keep going.
So, are you going to keep the name sudo, or are you going to rename it because you might not want to have everything backwards compatible? Yeah, so the question was if we are going to keep the name sudo. So for now, our package is called sudo-rs. But the binary that we are producing will be called sudo, because we are, in the end, trying to be a drop-in replacement, at least for those common use cases that yeah, people are used to using sudo for. So at least for those cases, we are trying to be drop-in, so we're trying to keep the name for the binary at least.
Okay. Hi. I saw earlier, like in the slides, that you pinpointed the fact that sudo runs as root as a downside. But I do not understand how would it work without this feature. You know what I mean? No.
Sorry, no, I didn't catch the...
So like in the downsides that you presented us of legacy sudo, yeah? There is basically like set UID. Yes.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So this allows you to run the program as root.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how would you circumvent that? How would you avoid that?
No, we're not trying to avoid being a set UID binary.
So it's like, okay, so it's more secure because it's Rust, so it doesn't...
Yeah, okay, definitely. Yeah, so the thing here is, and this is also something that takes some time for us, because most Rust crates aren't really being made for running as a set UID binary. So lots of things we can't really use because were made for different circumstances, for different use cases. So yeah, it takes some time for us to re-implement this properly. But yeah, having this C binary right now, which is sudo running, which has all these problems, or which at least could be better in some ways. Yeah, that's what I was pointing at there.
Do you have any plans to rewrite System D after that?
No, definitely not. Good luck with that.
I can reveal that I think the ISRG has some ideas about building like a distribution that's free of memory unsafe code. So at some point they'll need something to fulfill that role. So who knows?
The thing here also, and then this is the same like with, for example, we're using PAM right now, which is the pluggable authentication modules. And this is written in C. So, I mean, we're still using some C under the hood somewhere, but wanting to replace PAM means that you still have to keep that C interface layer, because right now there is no stable ABI on Rust, so it's really hard to do this without having more support from the rest of the Rust ecosystem.
Have you thought about adding BSD AUF support in addition to PAM? And the basic difference is that PAM uses shared libraries, while BSD AUF uses standalone executables.
Yeah, currently we're a Linux-only implementation, so right now we're not doing that because supporting BSDs actually takes a lot more than just changing the authentication mechanism, because there's all kinds of libraries that we need to use which are Linux-specific or BSD-specific. So yeah, that's right now that's not in our working plan, so that's not what we are doing right now. But we definitely want to keep it in such a way that we can add this eventually along the road somewhere when yeah, there's time and money and whatever.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Do we have time for one more, or?
No, I think we should unfortunately go to the break and then find Ruben in the halls if you want to ask more questions. Thanks, Ruben.